Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. Here, this is the spot where the conversations are pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. Did you bring your thinking caps? Because it's time to put them on. Because the conversation starts now.
Currently, I'm started volunteering, working with disadvantaged youths on helping them get their licenses to drive. And what I've learnt through my coaching is helping enormously there in connecting with them and being able to identify what's going on for them and what might be holding them back, where they're, because a lot of them have experienced, I'm getting different stories. A lot of them are very open in wanting to tell their story.
Mm-hmm. All right, here we go.
And yeah, so it's very powerful.
I was looking for something, but I can't find it. That's right. Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. Good day. This is the place where the conversation is pointed and the guests are sharp. The responses are never dull. Today we have the beautiful Melissa Oriel from Australia, and we're going to talk about the connection between mother and child. Some just are not cut out to be parents, and we have that expectation that because you are able to conceive and give birth, that there's going to be an automatic connection. There could be some generational trauma. There could be some postpartum. There could be a dysfunctional relationship. There could be rape. There could be incest. There could be, a whole plethora of reasons why individuals do not connect with their children. But what we want to do is we want to bridge that gap because the child didn't ask to come. And so what we have to do is we really have to figure out the best way. Is that maybe counseling? Is that maybe therapy? Is that maybe going to live with another relative? I remember back in the day, my mother told me, that was very common when parents couldn't afford it. They gave it to an aunt, an uncle, a grandmother, to raise the child. Foster care. If you're a foster parent, how are you relating with that child and their issues? So we're going to cover some of those big ticket items with our amazing guests. How are you, Melissa?
Very well, thank you, April. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So did I kind of hit the nail on the head with some of those issues there?
Yeah, very much so. There are various reasons why mothers may not connect with their children, and also reasons why children are sometimes born. You often hear mums say, "My baby won't settle." They're always unsettled. They don't want to be held. They can't understand what's wrong with their baby. And a lot of the research and education I've been getting myself around that lately has answered a lot of those questions for me, and it enables me to help others to understand and to find ways to reconnect with those children so that it's not so traumatic for both mother and child.
Absolutely, because that child, we want to grow up to be a functional adult. Dial back. Tell us a little bit about your story, your journey, and your truth.
Oh, my story. I grew up in the country. I grew up on a thoroughbred stud and racing stables that my parents built. And they started from very humble beginnings. And so it took a lot of work to build what they had, which ended up being a very successful, well-respected business. And that came at a certain cost because that took them a lot of hours. Horses aren't something that you can just clock on, at 9 o'clock in the morning and clock off again at 5. And so there were mares to be foaled, and that happens all during the night time as well, mostly at night. And so mum and dad were both very, very busy building their business and doing what they needed to do to get that up and running. So my care was outsourced to my dad's mum to start with, and then my mum's mum, my nana, moved to live on the same property with us. And so I spent a lot of time with her. You know, if I was home from school sick, it was a case of I'm either in the house on my own if I was old enough to be left there on the property, or I was down at Nana's. Nana looked after me. And so it was a generation. I think it still happens today. I
Oh,
think
sure.
mums are probably, there's more awareness around the connection between mother and child in particular, but it's not only mother and child, it's father and child as well.
Yeah, the father
And
has to
a lot
play an
of a
active
lot of
role.
dads have got a yeah, a lot of dads have got a bad rap over the years too, because they've been out, that was their job, you know, they were the provider for the family in a lot of families,
But
traditionally
also,
speaking.
there's a lot of fathers that don't get credit because they are raising the children. I
Absolutely.
have a situation that I know of where the mother said, you know what? Here you go. I can't take it. You
Yeah.
do it. And he has done an amazing job, not with one, not with two, but with four.
Yeah.
And so he's not getting the credit that he deserves because, it's hard for a woman to groom a young man or for a
Mm.
father to love and, well, not love, but grow a young woman, and the people that you bring into their lives. So you were fortunate in a way that you did have maternal grandparents that were
Mm.
there too, but they come from the old school. They're not the hip with it. They've still got their beliefs and their doctrines and the way that they were raised. So how
Mhm.
did that impact you? How did that impact your life?
It was interesting because I had two very different grandmothers.
Mm.
Dad's mother was the eldest of 14,
Oh gosh.
and so she had a very different view of the world. Like, she was the matriarch of the family. She'd raised so many of her siblings when her parents were, busy. So as she'd left home by the time some of her siblings were even born.
Mm.
And so that
A
was
lot
a
of
very different.
responsibility for her too.
Mm.
And
And she carried that responsibility right through to the end of her life.
yeah,
I
and
remember
it
when she
weaned
was
over to, taking care of you.
mm,
Grandmothers are a lot different now. I've got a friend that says, I'm not the porch swinging grandmother. They are, you come over, we have a good time, fine. You go home, but don't expect for me to raise your kid. Don't expect for me to be the one running back and forth to the school, always over here, and you have freedom. They're making parents really dial back and taking responsibility for their own kids.
mm.
So, I can see where, it could have been very different for your grandmother. Now, tell us about your other grandmother.
Yeah, well, my other grandmother, she was the only girl in her family. She was
Oh,
one
wow.
of five. And she was very different. Grandma was Dad's mum. She was very it was a different environment, a different atmosphere when I was at grandma's. It was very much, I was still doing my own thing. I had my things there. Whereas at Nana's, she was that quintessential Nana. The soft lap, the big hugs. I'd be in bed with her of a morning. I'd crawl into bed with her, and she'd lie there and tell me stories, and I'd bake
Okay,
with
so
her and
Nana
things
was
like
your
that.
mother's mother,
Mm,
and your grandmother was your father's mother.
yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
very different
Very,
grandparent
very, very
names.
different. Both very loving, just different ways of showing that. And as a
Was one
child,
a
you
stronger
don't necessarily.
disciplinarian than other?
Yes, I don't ever remember being disciplined, but I didn't feel as necessarily as open and playful at grandma's as I did at Nana's.
Okay, and so how did that translate to the relationship with your mother?
With mum, mum she's always struggled with being able to be outwardly affectionate. And there are, that's come from things that have happened throughout her childhood. And that's so, I grew up desperately wanting that connection with mum, and she wasn't necessarily able to provide that in the way I wanted it as a child. And so there was a disconnect between us. And so
Okay,
that was where Nana filled the gap for me.
let me ask a question. Do you remember back growing up what your relationship was? Because you say she wasn't able to connect. Did you look at how other mothers related to their children growing up, going to school? Did you feel, some sort of neglect? Were you punished? Were you disciplined? How did you not feel your feels?
I guess it wasn't so much a comparison between other children and their parents, because I didn't actually get to see that. Because I was on the property all the time. I was an only child until I was 6, and then my brother was born.
Mm.
And so that 6-year age gap more or less meant that we almost grew up as two only children.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because by the time he's born, I'm at school, in primary school. By the time he's finished primary school, I'm in high school. And then he's hit high school, and I've left, and I'm out of there. I'd left home by the time he was 14.
So what was the relationship with your father?
So, well, I just get where I got my idea of what a family should look like was the TV. That was the Brady Bunch, the Partridge Family. Those sort of family shows where I saw that interaction and I wanted that, but
Mm.
it wasn't happening for me. And I remember sitting on the floor because mum and dad were out so much. I'm sitting on the floor watching TV there one day, and something happened that I wanted to share with somebody. And I turned around and thinking, oh, there's no one sitting on the lounge behind me. I've got no one to tell this to. I've got no one to share it with. And so I was quite lonely as a child. So I'm so grateful for my grandparents, my nana, my grandfather was
Mhm.
there as well. And he had the honor of being called Pom Pom.
Mm.
I nicknamed him Pom Pom as a child, and that stuck with him.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Um, you're a mother of 3, correct?
Yes, 3
So when you
beautiful young
reflect,
adults.
okay, so when you reflect on, do you have grandchildren?
No, not yet.
Okay. So as you reflect back on your life, your experience, how did you shift and edit that when it came to your own 3 children?
I was very intentional. I had a very clear picture of the family the family life that I wanted to have, how I wanted to connect with my children, the closeness I wanted to help them explore, to allow them to experience everything they could experience if they showed interest in something as they were growing up. I was very encouraging to allow them to try it out and give it a good try, not just, indulge every whim, but it was, if you want to go and do dance, if you want to go and play sport, let's go and try it. Give it a good go. If you like it, then we'll keep going with that. If you don't, well, then we'll find what you do like, which was something that I didn't have the opportunity to do as a child myself. And so I told myself as a child that I didn't matter enough.
Mm.
And that wasn't something that was told to me. That was a story I took on myself.
Mm, mm, mm. Right, right. Based upon the images that you saw.
Yeah, the fact that, there wasn't the time. And then I found, because I wanted to go and do ballet. And I desperately wanted, I would, every time we drove past the ballet studio, my head would be hanging out the back window looking at it wistfully. And then I've only recently found out from mum that she actually did ballet, but
Oh,
she
wow.
didn't like it. She hated it. And so in her view, why on earth would I like it?
Right, right, right. She didn't
And so
understand.
I never had that opportunity. to
And,
find out and
that's
go
what I
on. Like,
encourage parents to do is allow your children to live their life. We cannot
yeah,
relive our lives vicariously through our children.
yeah.
We really can't. There's a lot going on now. Children are a lot different. They're coming up with their own self-awareness. They're living through the social media and the device now. They're more isolated. They're not doing the things that we used to do, where you probably went out daily and played with the horses and in the field and made mud pies, even if you were by yourself. They don't do that now.
Mm,
They don't have a sense of self. So they create these stories in their head based upon social media. It's very dangerous. And then let's talk about, you know, uh, body dysmorphia, drug addiction,
mm,
peer pressure,
mm-hmm.
all these other contributing factors that are just going to happen naturally. So you have what, two? What's the breakdown of you have daughters and
I've got
sons?
two girls and a son.
Two girls and a son. So it's a very different story raising a young man. Share with us a little bit about some of the differences that you see in the nuances in a boy versus a girl.
Oh, very much so. I had the two girls, my two daughters came first, and then my son. So he's the you have that firstborn, and you have the middle child, and then you have the baby of the family.
The pecking order.
Yes. And so he grew up with two other mums as well.
Mm.
And the girls, I did a lot of, once I had the children, I did a lot of reading and educating myself on because I've always been curious as to what makes people tick. I wanted to understand myself, what made me feel the way I did. And so I did a lot of reading books and learning about the developmental stages for children. I knew that, you know, there's the developmental stages 0 to 7 is where children are very egocentric. The world is all about them. And whatever happens in the world means something about them. So that's where perhaps some children, when their parents split up when they're young, they feel that it's their fault. They've done something wrong. Mummy doesn't love me enough to stay. Daddy doesn't love me enough to stay. I've been naughty. I've been bad. I've made them go away. When that's not going to be the case. But as those young children, we make that all about us. And so we'll tell ourselves those stories. Now, when we got to teenage years, I knew girls mature earlier than boys generally.
Oh, yes, they do.
And so when my eldest girl, she hit year 7, first year of high school, the girl that I'd known for the previous 12 years suddenly disappeared, and there was another girl in her place that was moody, didn't want to talk, was argumentative, but fortunately I knew that this was part of her psychological development.
Mm.
That's when our children start to experience themselves as separate to the family, to their parents, find their place in the world, start to push against those boundaries that we've put into place. And that's where those boundaries are so important too, because we give them boundaries, but we can't make them hard and fast. We need to allow a little bit of flexibility so they can push. When they push too far, you go, whoop, hang on, it's not quite ready to go any further. And so they have a safe container to grow within.
Mm. I
And
like
so
how
while my daughters were going through that stage, and it happened for both of them around the same age, beginning of high school, I just kept reminding myself this too shall pass. This is part of the process. Yes, it's not comfortable, and yes, I do get triggered and all the rest, and we did have arguments, but it will pass. And it did. 12 months later, she came back.
wow.
My son did that around the age of 16. And by that stage, his two sisters had both left home.
Mm.
And so I was left with a young man in the house and we had a very, very close relationship, one of the most affectionate young men you'd ever come across. He withdrew from me. And this was after my marriage breakup too. He was only 10 when my husband and I separated. And so he was going between my house and his father's house. He would spend usually around 3 nights a week with me, and he'd spend weekends with his dad because his dad lived near to where all his friends were, so he could walk to their house. And I
Okay.
understood that. I'm living out of town, but he still made sure he came out and stayed with me at least 3 nights a week. But during that time also, every time Mum said something, the eyes would roll, and it was, oh, she's speaking again. Like, honestly, do I have to listen to this?
Right.
And then sometimes he'd be in on the, he got the Xbox and he's playing games and that. And so I'm sort of monitoring that. But this is where it gets so challenging too for parents who have separated. And I've noticed this a lot because I also used to work at the school where my children went. So I saw it across the board for many, many years, where when parents split, the child gets to go, oh, I don't want to stay with you anymore. Your rules are too strict. I want to go and live with the other parent.
Mhm.
And so that parent relaxes the rules. They don't want to, make their child not want to be with them.
Right.
And
But you know
so
what? Children, in my
support.
opinion, need rules and boundaries.
Absolutely.
And it's very different and very difficult, I'm sure, to co-parent because there's two separate standards. And in some situations, not all, parents use the child as a pawn.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I know how to get back at her, let me do the exact polar opposite of what she's doing at her home. But you know what?
And they're in the child's ear too.
Absolutely. And the other
Giving them,
contributing factor of the you want to have a life, you want to continue to maybe date. The father may date, or there may be a step parent involved. There's a lot of contributing factors. What I suggest is number one, have an open ear. Listen to what your child is saying and not saying. Watch their behavior. Look at their social media. You're not going to have a cell phone and I don't have the password. I don't care. You ain't that grown. When you that grown, you on your own. Okay. I set some boundaries and some rules. Old school. I've had guests on my show that believe in unruling and unschooling. They just let their child grow on their own loins. Well, good luck with that because they're going to be a dysfunctional contributor to society. You have to learn to be able to go along and sometimes get along with the rules. Once your child hits the threshold of that door, they belong to the world. All the things that you've taught them go out, go through their backpack. Absolutely. Tell them what kind of contraband you might find. But because you've, again, violated their space, you need to approach it gently. Don't just attack them because you know that they're keeping secrets. Look at who these people are that they're talking to on social media. I had two young ladies in my car the whole time. They were on that device, and I said, let's have a conversation. I don't have anything to talk about. I said, well, your thumb's got something to talk about. They were talking to someone, and it's a dangerous way. You have to be
they
gentle.
were potentially talking to each other.
Yeah, probably about me. It was like
I've been there. I've been there and had one of my dearest friends. We'd go there, and our daughters would be, on the phones texting each other.
Right, and be in the same room in the house sometimes and texting. It's a different world. Okay, so we have to learn to adjust. So
it's about using, as you said, using those cues, seeing the behavior and looking at what need they're fulfilling with that behavior.
Right. What void?
Because that is one of my dearest passions is when I learnt about the 6 core needs that every human has. and that we will do, particularly the very first four. We have a need for certainty, which is safety, security, comfort. We have a need for uncertainty. That's variety and adventure. Everyone has a need for significance, to feel like they matter, that they're enough. And we have a need for love and connection. Now, when any one of those needs isn't being met in a healthy way, we will do whatever it takes to meet that need in whatever way we can. It's where gangs come in. That's where addictions are. That's where addictions, and sometimes it can be you're in a situation, a gang, maybe you don't particularly like what they do, but you've got somewhere to belong. You've got that connection. And sometimes, even if it's uncomfortable, that knowing what to expect, that's where people stay in relationships that aren't healthy for them too, because they develop a certain amount of certainty around, they know what to expect. They know that this is going to happen to them. They know that they're going to feel like this, but there's a certain comfort in that uncomfortableness.
That's a
And
great
that's where,
explanation. Yeah.
mm,
You know,
and,
it's the ease of the dis-ease.
mm,
And as we grow and we come to that self-realization, much like you did, there comes a point where we want to be forgiven. And that's self-forgiveness as well for whatever the situation may be. Why did I not feel that I was good enough? Why
yeah,
didn't I try hard enough? Why didn't my marriage work? Why are my kids on drugs? It's the endless answer of why. You said you went through a phase. How did you learn to forgive yourself?
it was through learning what had caused my triggers. The one thing with me is I did all that learning and research with my children, and most of the time I knew how to show up for them and what they needed, and to be able to provide that. The times when I couldn't, the times when I was triggered, when there was tension between my husband and I, and don't get me wrong, my husband, he is one of the most generous, kindest people you'd ever come across. What I didn't know was how to relate to him, and he didn't know how to relate to me. And so we were pushing each other's buttons. And so he would go off to work of a morning. I'm triggered. I'm feeling like I don't matter. I'm upset. And then the only ones home left to deal with that was my children. And so I would and the days when I was feeling like that, they were the days when my children would act up. And they were the days where you go, I honestly, can you not do this today of all days? What I realized was my children are a barometer for how I was feeling.
Mm.
When I was in a great space, their energy was great. They were playing, they were happy, they were, interacting with each other. The days when I wasn't in a great space, that's when they were at each other.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So they were picking
It's
up on
that
my energy.
source energy. Yeah, it's that source
Mhm.
energy.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
So now you have created balance, harmony, compassion, wisdom, and understanding, the recipe for success. And you've taken all of that and developed a coaching program. Tell us a little bit about the coaching program that you do with parents as well as young adults.
Yeah, I take it's very individual for everyone, because everyone's experiences are different. And so it's about finding out what is holding that person back, where they're feeling that they're not enough, or they're not understanding why they're being triggered, why their child is not acting the way that they think, or they feel like they're doing something wrong, or they're blaming the child for being a bad child too. Sometimes it's just that lack of knowledge. Once we start to develop awareness, everything is about developing the awareness of why things happen, what's happening for us, what's happening for them, knowing what to look for, and then moving forward to bringing them together
It's
and,
about
and building that connection.
It's about unity, but it all starts with a conversation.
Mhm.
Parents, you have to carve out the time to communicate with your child. If it's like, hey, come go with me to the grocery store, or come, let's go for a walk, or let me play that video game with you, teach me how to play that,
Yeah,
or,
I did that with my son.
yeah,
That was
or,
dreadful.
but that's good because they can laugh at you, but they're also knowing that you are interested in their
Mm,
life and what they're doing. Teach
and
them
that's
about
that's
music.
that's the real key, what you just touched on there, April, is being interested and being curious as to what's going on for them.
That's
It's
right.
not always about telling them what they should do or how they should feel.
Or
Every
what
emotion,
I did when I was a child. It's
yeah,
an interactive conversation. It's a banter back and forth,
yeah,
because my daughter, she thought she knew everything. And sometimes I ask her, okay, well, so how's that working for you? I tell my kids too, some lessons in life you're going to have to pay for. I can't talk you through them. As much as I try, this is your journey. Parents that are dealing with children with trying to find their identity and their sexuality, that's big now.
yeah,
That's, it is so different. When probably you and I were growing up, there was a lot of shame associated with that. That was something
mm,
you hide. You don't talk about that. Grandma and mama probably knew that you were special, you were different, but that's not something that we talk about openly.
yeah,
Now, and me and my husband were looking and saying, okay, this lifestyle and this culture is everywhere. Like you looked at television and saw the Brady Bunch and saw the Partridge Family. Now they're seeing a lot more interracial couples. They're seeing a lot of gay couples. They're seeing a lot of transgender. But this is where the world is now. And as
mhm,
adults, we need to morph into that or we're going to miss a whole generation. Your children want to be accepted for who they are, not who we want them to be,
yeah,
but who they are made to be and designed to be. That's going to require a lot of, conforming of us. It's a different learning, it's a different time. But if we grow into that, I think that it can make it a much more harmonious and loving space. Wouldn't you agree?
yes. We need to get really curious as to about what's made us how we feel too. It's not only about being curious about our children, it's about being curious about ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And identifying with that. Well,
Mm,
you have just been a wealth of information. Your voice is so soothing and comforting. I can see that you're very easy to talk to. You've been there, you have the experience. Tell my brains how to get in contact with you, Melissa, to work with you. It can be remotely. They don't have to be right there in Australia, which would be great to come
absolutely.
to
I,
your
I do a
office,
lot of
but you can do a lot of things virtually. Share
yeah, I
with
do a
us.
lot of work remotely now. COVID was brilliant for that.
Absolutely. So tell my friends and my brains how to get in contact with you.
At the moment, I am having to redo my website, but look out for consciousripplecreators.com.au. And also, you can contact me immediately through Melissa Oriel on Facebook. And I think it's yeah. I might give you the information. You can pop onto this after with the new email address. But there's also you can put Mel Oriel, MELORIEL 64 at gmail.com.
Get her on the Gmail, brains. That's new. That's technology. My mother would say, oh my God, I hate that internet. It's the devil. But
It's allowing us to increase our reach exponentially.
it is. And you know what? The information is overwhelming. So tap into your kids' heads, but most importantly, tap into their hearts. Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Mel, for being here with
Thank
me.
you, April. It's been such a pleasure.
I know I've enjoyed it so much as well. Brains, go right here to this location right here.
Yes.
Get your look at that. In Australia too. That's right. Get it, get it, get it. Love, like, share. This information is good for you. Share with grandmas because they're surrogate parents, as well as tap into your kid's head. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye, James.